Hello, bonjour. This month's episode of Crossroads La Croisée des Chemins is on communication. Communication when you speak a foreign language and you have to deal with different modes of communications between cultures, but also how engineers and neurodivergent people communicate. Neurodivergent meaning people who are on the autism spectrum or gifted or ADHD or all of that combined or any other type of neurospiciness, as my guest would say. I've invited Olivia Augustin, who's a civil engineer, a certified ESL teacher, and the host of the podcast English for Engineers, to share her expertise with us today. As a technical English trainer, she's specializing in helping non-native English-speaking engineers and technical professionals improve their communication skills. She uses a variety of methods and practical tools, drawing also from her experience as a neurodivergent person herself. Today, we're talking about the engineer mindset and how to use that to learn a language and to become a confident speaker. We've talked about how etiquette can ruin a project faster than the wrong grammar, and we're giving you a useful tip to avoid that. And when we'll talk about learning a language as someone who's neurodivergent, what are your strengths and what can you count on to crack the language code? And finally, we talked about the challenges female engineers may face and the impact that some teachers can have on their students, good or bad. Let's not wait any longer and let's say hi to Olivia. Hello, bonjour, bienvenue, welcome to Crossroads, La Croisée des Chemins, a show where guests from various backgrounds and ethnicities share with us stories and insights about their identity, language struggles, and moving abroad. Listen to inspiring life journeys of personal and professional growth, find out how my guests have taken their fate into their own hands and how they're contributing to making the world a better place. I'm your host, Kathy Intro, a certified professional neuro-language coach and teacher trainer who believes that language learning is a process of personal development and that speaking multiple languages is worth the mess it brings in our lives. This podcast is my contribution to making lesser heard voices more visible. So please subscribe, share, leave comments, and anything you can think of to boost the visibility even more. This podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms. So let's get started. Bonne écoute. Bonjour, Olivia.
Thanks for having me.
As usual, in this podcast, we'll start with language and identity and you as a learner and non-native speaker. And then we'll move into your field of expertise, which is communication, especially for engineers and neurodivergent people. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds perfect.
All right. So first question, you grew up in Austria, right?
Yes.
And now you live and work in the Netherlands. Were there any steps between those two countries?
Yes and no. I would say half a step was in between there. So I'm born and raised in Austria, with my parents coming from different parts of the country. And I grew up in a third part of the country. So I already grew up with three very distinctive dialects. And I would say my half step before moving to another country was that my German husband moved to Austria. So that was the half step, not really moving to another country, but getting to know another culture really, really well. And a lot of people think, oh, in Germany they speak German, in Austria they speak German, but there are worlds in between regarding use of the language and culture as well. And then the final step, moving to another country, was to the Netherlands 13 years ago.
And here again, you would think Dutch, German, Austrian, it's not so different. They're all, for me as a French person, they're similar.
That's all. No, you're correct. You're absolutely right. I had the same train of thoughts. And the Netherlands is, when you come here for the first time from Austria, it's just different. And it took me a while to realize, but that was an advice I was given before moving. Somebody told me it's not better and it's not worse. It's just different.
Mm.
And that was my mantra in the beginning. It's just different. It's just different. It's just different. But their approach to life is more balanced, I would say. The work-life balance is better. And my husband said something interesting because he came from Germany and he moved to Austria. And we lived in Tyrol. So between that small part between the south of Germany and the north of Italy. And he said after a while, he said, you know what I think about Austrians? From Monday to Friday, they work harder than the Germans. And from Friday afternoon to Sunday night, they live and party harder than the Italians.
Right, a good
So the
balance to
balance
have.
is in being in the extremes, but I don't know if that's really healthy on a long term. Yeah.
And now Austria seems very appealing to me now.
Austria is very appealing. It's beautiful if you're on vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always the
But
thing, yeah, with living
behind the
and
screen, it's really hard work. But again, depending where you live, that's in the west of Austria. It's a bit more relaxed to the east.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when you were in Austria, you were working as an engineer at the time, and
Yes.
then you switched to
Yes.
teaching English as foreign language.
Not immediately. How should I say it? Sometimes looking back, I don't take myself that seriously in that period, but I opened a gluten-free bakery for people with gluten intolerance and other intolerances. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. It started actually with baking for family and friends with intolerances, and more people came and said, oh, I have this combination, could you come up with a recipe for me? And I developed my recipes the same way I did concrete testing back in schools. I even repurposed those Excel sheets where you put in all the data. I think it was the manual working with your hands that was like a therapy for me,
Mhm.
and selling that stuff, yeah, made it for made it a cheaper hobby. But that's one of the reasons why I closed down the bakery, because I don't know why, I had always had the biggest wedding cakes on the hottest day of the year, and that was a nightmare. And as someone with ADHD, which I didn't know back then, but you know how we are, every 5 years we kind of find a new hot topic that we're interested in. And I also gave courses, because the Dutch people, I mean, there are a few Dutch people going to listen and say, no, that's not true, I can cook. But compared what Austrians and I guess French people define as being able to cook and bake, the Dutch can't. They're using mixes for everything, even for pancakes. So I taught that. I had a course, 4 basic ingredients, what you can do with it. And I gave that course in German, in Dutch, and in English. And then I started, I was approached by a company um, who had food supplements for people with intolerances. And then I grew into translating for them and interpreted
Mhm.
for them. And then I had a friend, and she told me that she's a new friend, and she said, oh, I'm an English teacher. And I was like, oh, honey, I have to read your text like 3 times to understand your English. And my lovely person, but I thought, if she can teach English, I can do that as well. And that's how I went and applied for the best paying online language schools, and they said, we only were working for people who have a license. And I said, in true New manner, how difficult can it be? And I went out there and I got my license in no time, and then I started teaching everything and everyone. And after a year, I had my first engineer as a student. And
Mhm.
that engineer said, oh, it's so easy to work with you. You understand me. You know what kind of language I need. You know the stress I'm having with my project, and you kind of explain language for the first time in a way that I can understand it. And that was the moment where I thought, oh, that's it. And that was 5.5, almost 6 years ago. And since then, ever, I'm working only and solely with engineers.
Right. So yeah, that
And
wasn't the plan at the beginning, English for engineers. It just became sort of a natural evolution.
yes, exactly. A very, very quick one. It was,
And
yeah.
what would you say is the style? Like, how do you learn as an engineer? What how different is the approach?
Um, that might come as a shock, but I wasn't very good at English back at school. Because, the regular approach in a school is you have all those boring sentences that you have to learn. My name is, I come from, I am, that's my age, where's the train station? And it's just you learn vocabulary and grammar and constructions that you feel you will never need that. And then your first trip to an English speaking country, and you just freeze because you thought, oh, you even have good marks at school, but you can't even order. I remember that I was in London and I was so tired, and instead of ordering sparkling water, I ordered spelling water.
And everyone
Stuff
thinks
like
you're
that.
stupid, or that's what you think. Oh my
Exactly.
God, everyone is
Exactly.
judging me.
But you don't know differently. You always think you need grammar books and you need those boring exercises. And somehow that's not the way I learn. I always look at a topic from the outside. I try to find the structure in it, the system in it. And I've never thought of it as a different language teaching method. I just thought of it as like an engineer's brain works. You want to understand the system. So what's different when grown-ups learning a new language is they have a specific purpose. It's not for being able to go to university and having good grades. It is because they need it. They need it for they're marrying someone from another country, or they're moving to another country, or in my case, it's engineers who have living in their home country but having international projects, or they want to move to an English-speaking country. So there's a very specific purpose why they need it. So I kind of just scrap out and leave out all the unnecessary stuff and really focus on what they need. And for some of my clients, they mainly communicate with their stakeholders through emails. So I focus on their writing skills because they never talk to them. So why would I mess around with their pronunciation? It's not a priority at that moment. That comes later automatically. And on the other hand, if I have a client and that person mainly communicates with his or her stakeholders verbally, why would I be a pain in the bahookie about commas and writing style if all they need to do is talk? And on the other hand, another thing is at least in the clients I had so far, very often I hear, oh, I want to sound like a native speaker. Or they say, what's the correct pronunciation? Is it tomato or tomato? And it doesn't matter. It absolutely does not matter. The great thing as a foreigner is, as someone who speaks English as a second language, we can mix and match all the accents we love and like. Because main goal of language or of communication is that person B understands what person A is saying. And no matter if I say potato, potato, you know what kind of thing I mean that's growing in the ground that you can boil or eat. So communication is about understanding each other. So I, for example, only work on the pronunciation of my clients if it's so bad that another person cannot understand what they're meaning. That's
as long
my
as you
general
understand,
approach.
accent doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
actually be proud of your accent. It's something that makes you unique.
yeah. And usually meetings with only non-native speakers in English go very well because everyone's kind of used to hearing different accents, having the same kind of vocab. And when you throw a native speaker in there who doesn't have experience working with international people, everyone is feeling bad because, oh, we don't live up to the level of the native speaker. The native speaker is the odd one out, the one who isn't able to mix in an international group.
Exactly. And that's the one person who didn't learn a second language that
Usually,
could be used. That's also something that I tell my students, like, don't mess around with your French, German, Italian, Spanish accent, because that US or that English speaking person, they are already happy that they don't have to learn German or French.
Yeah.
So
as long as they can understand you, then everyone's good.
Yeah. What I do find important, though, is etiquette or cultural differences.
Yeah.
Because if you're not polite in a way that the listener thinks or defines politeness, you can ruin projects far easier than with wrong grammar.
Yeah.
Nobody cares if you forget your third person S, if you are too direct, or if you're rude, or if you're conceived rude. Yeah.
How do you work on that? Because you cannot know the rules before you encounter those situations. So how do you handle that?
From first-hand experience, it helps that you let people know that you're not a native speaker.
Hmm.
So my husband is German, and he works as well in the Netherlands. And very often, both of us, when we go into a situation where we are the ones who have to, criticize is a hard word, but where we have to give an opinion before we start. Separate. Each one of us came up with that method by ourselves, but it's the same. We say, listen, we're not native Dutch speakers. My husband says, I'm German, I'm very direct. I say I'm from Austria, Tyrol, where I come from. We're very direct. So please, if you feel that I'm harsh, it's not because I want to be harsh. There's a translation going on in my head. So everything I'm saying now comes from the heart and with a lot of love. And then I start. So I kind of prepare people, or I say, listen, it's not my mother language. Maybe I just can't find the perfect word right now. For lack of better word, I want to use this, but think of it as a little bit softer stuff. So explaining, and reminding people that it's not your mother language. I have that problem in Dutch. I don't have a strong accent at all. So people in short conversations up to half an hour, very often they think I'm coming from the south of the Netherlands. And so if you have a strong accent, I have a dear friend, she's from Poland, and she has a really strong accent in Dutch. She can say whatever she wants, and sometimes it sounds so rude. Really, it sounds rude. And people are like, oh, it's just her accent. She doesn't mean it like that. And then when I come with almost no accent and I say the same thing, people are offended.
Mm.
But because they think I should know what I'm talking about. But as a non-native speaker, often you're not. So just remind people that it's not your mother language, and
Yeah.
that
As you
helps.
say that, I realize I started doing that recently. I was like, oh, I'm
It's
French,
okay.
so I'm going to say something that I'm going to express an
Yeah,
opinion,
yeah,
not sugar coated as a North American person would do. Pardon my French.
exactly. Yeah. No. It is like that. And sometimes even if I know a word in Dutch, in English, no, it's not that bad. But in Dutch, sometimes I say stuff like, "How do you say this and that in Dutch?"
Hmm.
And then people are, oh yeah, it's not your mother language. I'm no, it's actually my fourth language. Like,
Yeah.
ooh,
And I think there's one thing that's
helps.
very important to mention when you say it's not your mother language and you're not from here. Don't apologize for it. It's just you mention a
No,
fact, but it's not, oh, I'm sorry, I might make mistakes. Don't play down your character.
oh, that's
Just
a
be
very good
like,
point. Yes,
that's a
yeah, it's
fact,
a fact, not an. Yeah, true.
not something to be sorry for.
No, absolutely not. It's something to be proud of because you made the effort to learn another language and dive into another culture, and that costs a lot of energy.
It does.
Yeah.
And your attitude, the way people interact with you, it all starts with how you present yourself. And then we can maybe go into the communication skills. As a
Hmm.
neurodivergent person, sometimes neurodivergent people are presented as people who struggle with interpersonal relationships and how to communicate. So, how does that work when you add on one more layer of speaking in a foreign language?
Yes, that's a really good question. I do not subscribe to the idea that neurodivergent people have communication problems because if if I as a neurodivergent person talk to another neurodivergent person, there are no communication problems. We understand each other just perfectly fine. Um, and I stopped explaining it too much because someone who's not neurodivergent won't understand it anyway, and someone who is doesn't need the explanation. So if there is someone who wants to understand it, I say it's like a different operating system. It's like the whole world is Windows and I'm an Apple computer. So all the Apple computers, all the devices, the iPhones, the iPads, that all works together like like perfectly fine. All the data is updated and it's just great. The moment you have to deal with a Windows app on your iPad, everything crashes. It's just, and it does work on itself. All the Windows stuff, it's working together perfectly fine. But it's just not how my brain works. But regarding communication, when I grew up, I often had the feeling that people do not understand me, that my humor is not understood. And often I thought when I tried to explain something in order for other people to understand me, they thought I'm bringing up excuses.
Mhm.
So very often I heard, I don't want to hear your excuses. And I'm like, I'm not making up stuff. I just want you to understand my train of thoughts and how I came up to that solution, to that idea. So I had to, without knowing that I'm neurodivergent, I had to come up with interpreting and understanding that neuronormal culture. And 20 years ago, I always said, I don't like people who are not authentic. And now, with 44 years of age and knowing what I'm knowing now and knowing what I am, it's not that I don't understand neuronormal people. It's that what they say and what they do is so different. So you have to, when I say A, I mean A. So sometimes people think I'm sarcastic, but I just really meant what I was saying, or just it was really a question that I wanted to know, and people think it's a joke that I'm throwing in, but I really wanted to know. So because I had to translate neuronormal Austrian to my neurospicy Austrian that I was talking, I kind of tried to find structure. That's why I love structures and system. I was tried to find those structures behind the words. So, and to look behind the surface, under the surface. It's not only skin deep. And that, I think that made it easier to understand different cultures and different languages. Because as a what's the real word? Neurodivergent. I wanted to say neurospicy. As a neurodivergent person, you have to dig deeper all the time.
Yeah, and you like
You
to
already
dig deeper.
Exactly, and you like to dig deeper. So learning another language, learning about another culture, it's just a new hyperfocus. I actually think that it's even easier for us.
That's what I tell
to dig
people.
in.
Use your hyperfocus capabilities to go fast for a while. Then you get bored, you switch something, and then you come back to it.
And being an engineer, not, but we're really good in finding the mistake, the one thing that does not fit into the system. And normally we are, I mean, that's very a general statement, but we're good in finding systems and structures. So funny enough, I can pretty easily and fast, I can tell with my clients if they're neurodivergent or not, even if they don't tell me. And sometimes if it's in a one-on-one setting, I say, may I ask you a personal question? Are you, whatever, highly gifted, ADHD? Do you have ADHD or autism spectrum? And it's like, how do you know? And because you
found
get
me.
my way of teaching, you found me. And for example, a really good example is I had a client, and he was also from Germany, but he was fluent in Italian, and he never read or heard the word accommodation. So I said, hey, you know French, you know Italian, use the word accommodation as you can read it and pronounce it in an Italian way. And he said, accommodatio. Oh, I know the word, because it's the same word in Italian. So neurospicy people are really good in going back to the roots of a word and connect that.
Yeah. And again, there are various, there's a range of neurodivergent
it's
people,
a wide
very
range,
different,
exactly.
like ADHD,
No two
autism
people are
spectrum,
the same.
they're not the same, but everyone is different from the majority of human beings.
So we're already used to translating.
Yeah, and there's some flexibility and
exactly. And being neurodivergent or not, it's a different way of thinking. But every single language is just a different way of thinking.
Yeah, and every language is a system. So you need to crack the system and then practice it to build
exactly.
the circuits. If you're talking to engineers and computer
Yeah,
engineers, you just have a wired in circuit when you're born into a language, then you add on more circuits, and it takes time and
yeah,
trial and error and iterations.
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Just approach it
and
as an engineer.
yeah, that's basically what I tell my clients. Just approach it as another project or as another system. I always say, learn the system. If you know how it works, you can work the system. And if you're really good at it, you can start tweaking that system and making mistakes on by design. And that's the same with every other. It's like music. First, you have to learn to play compositions of other um,
Mm.
compo- um, composers,
Composers.
and then you're really good. And then at the end, you're ending up with jazz when you tweak the system. So yeah,
Yeah.
same with language.
And in speaking of that, are there some effective ways to learn a language for neurodivergent people? We kind of talked about it, but
What really works for my clients, because they're super busy and they don't really have the time to learn English, they just need it for their next project, is I ask them, what do you do in your free time? And it's really interesting stuff that comes up. I had one engineer like 50, and he told me, don't laugh at me, but I love watching the Kardashians. And totally not my thing, but I said, good, now go watch it in English. Don't watch the translation to your mother language. English audio, English subtitles. I had another one, and she said, I love reading, and her favorite book or books are Harry Potter. I said, great, buy them again in English, because you already know what happens. You know what is going on in that book, in that show, in that movie. So it's easier to understand, and it's something you love doing anyway. It's something that relaxes you. Just do the same thing, but do it in English.
yeah, that's something I found with the engineers I've worked with. We always start with the job and then they get bored and then we go into what matters, and that's when they
Yeah,
crack it, and that's when they get engaged with the language, and that's when they make
yeah,
progress because they do something in the language about something they like, and then you cannot stop them.
exactly,
And then it
exactly.
transfers to
That's
the
that's
job.
true. Yeah, because all the industry-related language, that vocabulary, they most of the time they know that in English already.
Yeah.
But engineers are perfectionists, so they think they have to do everything in a perfect way, and that holds them back, and they don't start talking.
Mm.
So I'm currently working with I'm a guest lecturer at the university in South America, and I'm working with a group of PhD students. Amazingly smart people. I'm like really flabbergasted about their PhD project. It's awesome. And there's one guy in there and making complicated mathematical models of I don't know what, but he's not talking. And last time I just said, hey, what's your favorite food? And I couldn't, he didn't shut up for 20 minutes. He was going on and on and on and on. And I was like, yes, I found your spot. I found, now I know how to get you talking. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have one more question about engineers because it's a very masculine world. There's a lot of male engineers. How about female? They have I feel another challenge beside being a foreign language speaker. They're also feeling illegitimate, maybe, or
Yeah.
like imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yes. And I can only speak from my own experience and from the experience I had with my female clients, with my female engineers. I don't know why it's not really getting better, but we had to be double and triple as good as our male colleagues 30 years ago, and it's still the same. It's very much depends on the company culture. There are companies where it's really awesome, but because of that, a lot of women in STEM even have to try harder every day than their male colleagues. It's like the top level perfectionism. And it's harder. It's true. I have a harder time putting them at ease than the male colleagues. The men are less afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm.
In
Because
my
they'll have a second chance.
Yeah,
Ladies may not have a second chance. Or feel
exactly.
that they won't get one.
Yeah. So with women, I found it depends a bit, but very often it's easier for them in a one-on-one setting
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have to prove themselves um, that much, and it's still difficult. Yeah, it's still more difficult for them, and because you don't only have to, even if you're it's a triple layer actually. Number one, if you're neurodivergent, you have to translate from neurodivergent to neuronormal. If you're a woman, you have to translate from female communication styles to male communication styles. And then you have the third language, or the other language on top of that. It's exhausting
Yeah. So be patient
to,
with yourself, be kind to yourself, do your best, and
and
work on yourself, like self-development more than language development, or in
yeah,
addition to.
working on your confidence.
Mhm.
That sounds so generic. Work on your
Yeah,
confidence, because
I know.
actually, no, actually, I wouldn't even say work on your confidence, because we have worked our way through all the educational steps, and we were a group of, our class was 30 people, and we were only two girls, and at the end of 5 years, only 11, I think 15 finished, and only 11 passed the final exam, and I was the only girl back then. um Even for me, it changed when I realized a lot of my bosses, they just, in Austria, as you say, they only cook with water.
What does it
It's
mean?
nothing special. It means that they don't cook with any special ingredients.
Okay.
They use the same water we are using. They just use basic math. It's just the same. They have the same tools. They just use it. They're better connected maybe, and they just use it in a more confident, assertive way.
Mm.
Yeah. And if a man is assertive, then ooh, he's a leader. If a woman is assertive, you don't want to work with her. She's so opinionated.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So it's
but that's
unfair.
an
Gotta
it
deal with
will
it.
exactly. It's if you want to change that, you have to choose another direction of work, another career where you can fight for that full time. If you're an engineer, you have to just find a company with a good company culture, because they
Yeah.
are there. They are
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. Because that's why
Yeah.
one of the reasons why so many female engineers drop out of the job, because they don't find those companies, or there are not enough good companies out there. All right, let's wrap up with the 3 questions. First, can you tell us about a crossroads moment, where you defining moment, decision, or person you met that had an impact on your life? There must be
Ooh,
many, but just one.
yeah. I started thinking about that question yesterday, and I couldn't come up with like one answer. That's the crossroad moment. But one thing popped into my mind, and it's maybe after recording that episode, I have way better examples. But when I was 13, 14, I asked my math teacher if I should go into civil engineering or electrical engineering, because I was interested in both back at the time. And he said something, it sounds weird in a translation, but in German it's a compliment. In Austria it's a compliment. He said, Olivia, it totally doesn't matter, because as far as I can tell, you're my best horse in the stable.
Oh, that's cute.
So, and I thought that I'm not really good at math, because being neurodivergent, you sometimes are too fast, you rush through. I messed up with the commas. So, but he said, you understand the formulas on a deeper level,
Mm.
because I never just memorized them. I had my logic why they work that way. So that was definitely a point where I thought, someone that I respect tells me I could do it all.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
that's
a
an
good. That's
important.
yeah. And
That's
and the other, I think the other negative defining moment was a teacher at technical college, and he said, women belong into the kitchen belongs into the basement, and the basement on water.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I can smell the alcohol from coming out from your mouth back into the back of the classroom. I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's those are the points in my life where I get stubborn, and I just do it despite of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so good. So extreme that it's not breaking you, it's just pushing you to
Yeah.
prove him wrong.
Yeah. I'm pretty good in doing stuff that people tell me not to do. And I'm like, I'll show the world.
So speaking of showing the world, what's the next step on your path?
Oh, the next step. Actually, I just took the first step into not new direction. I'm still doing what I'm doing, working with my engineers. But I started last week being a guest lecturer at the university.
Congratulations.
Which is super exciting. Thank you. Which is super exciting for me. Those actually 2 universities, and the technical faculties from those universities from 2 different countries, and both times those decans, those faculty heads found me through my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another, maybe an imposter syndrome moment. But before I gave my very first guest lecture, I was so nervous, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm teaching at university. That's kind of crazy. And then I became really, really nervous. And then I thought, wait a moment. For the last 6 years, you're working with engineers who are 50 years or older, who have 20, 25 years of experience, who have leading companies with 800 people. And now you're teaching puppies from 20 years or 25. You'll be good.
Yeah, it's just the
Yeah.
whole academic environment brings out those feelings of, am I going to be
Exactly.
enough?
But it's not. It's so yeah, that's very exciting, I think. And to be honest, I love having my own company. I love that mix of teaching, but also boring stuff like doing my taxes, doing my podcast, doing my marketing. It's the mix of everything that keeps me engaged, and just really working with. I'm just so happy when I can work with engineers, because I always say I dip my toes still into the tech water, but without the stress that comes with being an engineer.
All right. And speaking of engineers, I think you're offering a discount for listeners of this podcast on your email package.
Emails for engineers template package. Yes, I do. One of the things when I moved to the Netherlands, and I was already able to speak Dutch quite good, and then I had to write my first email. And I started writing, and I was like, oh, I have no idea how you write a Dutch email.
Mm-hmm.
And it needed to be professional. So I was looking the internet up and down for good templates. I couldn't find them, and I came up with my own system of I love systems. My own systems how to write an email that I can replicate all the time. And a lot of my clients had the same problem with English. So I had those email templates, 30 plus templates, long or shorter, for a lot of different situations in project communication. And I put them together in an email template package that they seem to love. And yeah, I thought it would be maybe a good idea to give the podcast listeners here a 30% deal on that.
Much appreciated. And your podcast is called English for Engineers, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So where can we find it?
Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all major streaming platforms.
And we'll have an interview together on your podcast,
yes,
by the way.
We do a crossover. As soon as we stop recording this episode, we go over and record the next one. Exactly.
And go to Canada, leave the Netherlands for Canada. And French Canadian, being an engineer in Canada, all of that.
And all your expertise on neural language training.
Yeah, how to learn. It's very systematic as well, so it should appeal to engineers.
I think so.
Where else can we find you?
You can find me the easiest on my website, marcode.org.
Okay.
And I
Links
think
are
you put the
below
link.
in the show
Yes,
notes.
links are below. That's the easiest. LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with engineers from all around the world on LinkedIn. People can. That's another nice way of communicating. Is my emails. They normally go out on Monday, and if the email subscribers reply to one of my emails, I promise I'm always replying back, and it's myself and no one else. So it's for me. I love. I'm a letter writer. So I love communicating with people from around the world through the emails as well. Instagram, but mostly newsletter and LinkedIn. That's my and the podcast.
Okay. Thank you so much
Yes.
for coming to this podcast today.
Thanks for
Real
having
pleasure.
me.
Bye.